那么今天下午呢，我们的第一个主题演讲是由来自 StorageOS 的 CEO Alex Chircop 和来自红帽公司的首席高级工程师 Erin Boyd 为大家带来的介绍 CNCF SIG 存储，介绍云原生存储。让我们欢迎二位。Our first topic this afternoon is Intro CNCF SIG Storage and Intro to Cloud Native Storage by Erin Boyd, Senior Principal SE from Red Hat, and Alex Chircop, CEO of StorageOS. Welcome.
Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're watching. My name is Alex Chircop. I'm the CEO of StorageOS and one of the co-chairs of the CNCF Storage SIG. And my co-presenter?
I'm Erin Boyd. I work for Red Hat in the Office of the CTO. I'm also one of the co-chairs for the CNCF Storage SIG. And today we're going to be talking about an introduction to the CNCF Storage SIG, what we do, and hopefully how you can also get involved. So thank you for watching this, and we look forward to questions. So next slide, please, Alex. Okay, so what is the purpose of a SIG in the CNCF? Well, the SIGs were created a while back. The storage SIG was one of the first. The purpose was that we could scale more easily the ability to find quality projects to join the CNCF, to look out to our landscape, find where there's gaps, and solicit and grow projects within that space. You can find more details on SIGs at that last link. In addition, it's meant to strengthen the project ecosystem, listen to users and projects, and understand where the needs are. It's meant to identify the gaps, as I mentioned, within the landscape, and educate and inform users. As Alex will talk about in later presentations, we have several assets created that help customers and users understand, at least for our purposes, how and when they should be using certain types of storage. And then it also allows us to focus our attention, our resources, to help foster those projects. So as projects join, perhaps at a sandbox or an incubation level, the purpose of the SIGs is to help grow that project and into the next level, whether it be incubation or graduation as well. It also helps us clarify the relationship between the projects. For, CNCF only being, less than 6 years old, it helps us understand and the users understand how we relate to different parts of the project and engage those communities more effectively in terms of how they're going to be contributed to the TOC. It also helps reduce the workload. As we mentioned, it helps scale. Part of that is just the sheer number of projects wanting to join the CNCF. So the SIGs help offset doing the due diligence and reviewing and talking to those projects as well. The SIGs are all vendor neutral, just as any of the entities within the CNCF are. So in terms of project handling, our responsibility is really to understand and document the high-level roadmap of those projects within that space. So understand the health of the project, their goals, what they hope to accomplish, and where they fit in terms of maturity. It also helps us identify if there's numerous other projects within the project landscape that also fit this, or maybe it fills a gap that is within the landscape. It also performs a health check. Does it have open governance? Does it have a healthy number of contributors? Is it going in a positive direction? It also allows us to perform a discovery and talk to candidates and projects about their intentions, their technologies, and any questions we might have about their architecture. In addition, the SIG also helps prepare a presentation to the TOC, and as each project is looked at, we can assign the project to a different SIG if it needs to be, or reviewed as an additional SIG based on the technology. The next diagram shows us how the process is generally from as a project will go through incubation. So right now, the project starts off submitting a PR and goes through a brief triage through the TOC. So this is just meant as a litmus test is, does this fit into the model of something that is appropriate to be accepted within the CNCF? Then the project does a SIG presentation. This is recorded. This piece is critical as it's meant to offset the TOC, providing them a way to watch this in the time that they have. And then the TOC, once they do that, they review our recommendation and the presentation. And if they would like to go forward, we then have a TOC member assigned along with the SIG to do a thorough due diligence. Once that's done and we have talked to users and different people of the community to support that project, it goes up for a public comment period. And then lastly, with all that being satisfied, it goes forward with the TOC vote. And if the vote is, I believe, either 2/3 or a simple majority, depending on what document you're looking at, it goes forward to incubation. So end user education, at least from a SIG point of view for us, is pretty critical. What we try to do is focus on providing very unbiased, high quality data to our users to help them understand the best patterns and anti-patterns, best practices of these different cloud native technologies in terms of what they're trying to develop and how they should be used. Some of these include white papers, presentations, videos. We've clarified the different terminology to remove any ambiguity when we're talking about these technologies, and really recommend best practices and oncoming trends. Alex will talk about later a link to our newly published white paper that is very comprehensive, that covers a lot of these things. And in so much as possible, we try to not, as we said, be vendor focused, be neutral, and provide a very unbiased, non-marketing lens of how these technologies interact with each other. And we encourage and desire to have a lot of end user impact. We want to know how people are using this, what feedback they have, expectations or pain points. That helps us identify where there are gaps within the landscape, where due diligence needs to be refocused, and also add to the white paper where we can be using these technologies in terms of different use cases. And this also allows us to put these into reports and presentations that help drive different features beyond just the storage level as well. And community enablement. After all, the whole purpose of open source is to enable this community to drive and make decisions. So SIGs are part of that. They're an open organization. We have meetings with published agendas, and which are all recorded, and notes are gathered at the end and also published. We have a mailing list, which you're welcome to join, and all of our meetings are listed on the SIG meeting calendar. And again, openly published and maintained and archived, so you can always go back and read them. The SIGs are seen as the trusted advisors to the TOC. Since the TOC is a limited number of people, sometimes they do not have a subject matter expert on a specific area. So the SIG is meant to offset possible gaps in technology understanding or deep understanding of the technology. And the TOC looks to the SIG to help with the recommendation about different projects and different technologies, and to periodically check in with those areas. If that's doing well, what is the state of the community for different projects and the health of that technology, and propose any actions. Many of the projects are put on a yearly health check, and the SIGs help contribute to understanding where the project stands and how it should be moved through the process, whether it's sandbox to incubation or incubation to graduation.
Excellent. Thanks, Erin. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about some of the things that we've been doing in SIG storage. So, as Erin mentioned, we're obviously focused on providing the storage expertise to the TOC. And the reason why we think this is so important is because all applications need to store state somewhere. There is no such thing as a stateless architecture, and so we are looking at ways on how to integrate stateful applications into Kubernetes and into other orchestrators and other cloud-native patterns, which enable storage to provide the portability and the scalability that cloud-native patterns provide for the environment. This is covering any type of storage and any type of method of persisting data. So it's not just about the more traditional volumes, but also extends to things like object stores and key value stores and databases, for example. Our mission specifically is to help work with the storage projects, as Erin mentioned, working with other groups that are related to this space, and to primarily help with the due diligence and the review of storage projects with the TOC. One of the things, as I mentioned, that we want to focus on is the fact that this is actually quite a broad topic area. So we have when looking at projects that fit the storage scope, we're covering everything from file systems and block stores, as well as object stores, databases, key value stores, and also some other mechanisms like, for example, image distribution and caching processes. With this, together with our aim of sort of trying to educate and help define the terminology and the different facets of the storage scope, we've written a storage landscape white paper. This is now at version 2. We've been updating it over time to cover different changes that have happened in the landscape over the last couple of years. And the idea here is to provide the ability for developers and teams who are adopting cloud-native storage to be able to understand the different attributes of different storage environments, such as availability, scalability, performance, durability, and consistency. And the reason here is that more and more it's evident that there isn't a single storage system that fits all use cases, and therefore it's important to be able to understand the requirements of an application, such that a team can match the requirements and the functionality to the different services or platforms that are available. The SIG storage is formed of a number of co-chairs and a number of tech leads, and our liaison who sits on the TOC is Xiang Li, of course, of etcd fame. We're always interested in hearing from the community, and we're always interested in anybody who would like to volunteer to be a tech lead to help with project reviews or putting content together for the community. So if that sounds like it's you, please help us out by joining the mailing list and talking to one of the co-chairs or one of the tech leads to join the SIG. We work with a wide variety of different groups and teams, covering the SIG storage in Kubernetes, as well as the CSI team, who CSI being the industry standard API for connecting orchestrators like Kubernetes to different storage systems, as well as a number of the other CNCF SIGs, where we often have to interact with, as many projects often span multiple areas. A little bit of what we've been working on over the last few months. we talked about the new CNCF Storage Landscape Whitepaper. This is a V2 release and covers new areas like databases and updates to the management interface and the APIs that are available. We've been very busy working with the TOC, reviewing new or existing projects that are joining the CNCF at different levels. And going forward, we're working on some documentation to discuss different use cases. And we're also working on a performance and benchmarking white paper. The CNCF SIG storage team is a wide variety of people. There are probably representations from maybe 30 different vendors, as well as a number of independent consultants or independent developers. We also have had presentations from a wide variety of different projects, and these are helpful as a review process, and also to provide reference information for the TOC as part of due diligence processes. The project presentations tend to be open and interactive, and whether or not your project is looking to join the CNCF, we're always very keen to hear about storage projects in the community, whether it's a storage system, it's or perhaps API or integration projects, or even frameworks that help automate cloud native environments. The scope is very, very broad. There are a number of different projects at different levels of maturity, which are now part of the CNCF, including graduated projects like Vitesse and TIKV and Rook, who are just going through final votes, as well as a number of different sandbox and incubation projects like OpenEBS, Longhorn, ChircopOS, and Dragonfly. And you'll see there that we have a number of different, the scope of the projects is fairly large, covering, traditional volume providers to key value stores, as well as operators and orchestrators for different storage platforms, and finally Dragonfly, providing image distribution for things like container images within a scale-out environment. A little bit more detail about the storage landscape white paper. We think that this is a really useful reference white paper that helps cover off the landscape in the storage space for cloud native environments. We cover the different attributes of a storage system, and we try and provide an understanding of the different layers in a storage system, because it's really important to understand how those different layers interact in a cloud native environment. And we also spend quite a bit of time providing the detail of the different ways of accessing these storage systems, both from a data access interface as well as a management interface. So the data access interface would be how you access the data plane of the storage system, which could be, say, for example, a file system on a volume, or it could be via an API with an object store, for example. And then the management interfaces cover off the items where Kubernetes or an orchestrator would interact with the control plane of a storage system to handle things like dynamic provisioning, for example. The attributes of a storage system define the capabilities, if you wish, of those storage systems. We've focused on 5 different attributes, and those attributes could have a number of different accesses for the way they're measured. So, for example, availability could be discussing things like failover or redundancy capabilities of a system. Scalability could be talking about the number of operations per second, but likewise we could be talking about throughput or the number of clients that can connect to a storage system. Things like performance, for example, again, can be measured in a variety of ways, such as latency, operations, and throughput. And it's also important to understand that no storage system can provide the same criteria across each of these different attributes, and most systems have some sort of compromise. So, for example, the ability to scale throughput might come at the cost of how many operations you can implement in a system, or, for example, the scalability in terms of providing access to lots and lots of clients might impact the latency or the failover capabilities of such a system. So it's important for developers and teams to understand how their systems operate so that they can choose the right system. And equally, it's important to understand the different layers within a storage system that are providing capabilities from the top of the system, where we have virtualization at the orchestrator or the operating system with things like bind mounts and logical volume managers, to the topology, to the data protection methods like replicas or erasure coding, all the way down to the bottom of the stack where data is actually physically stored. And it's worth pointing out that lots of storage systems actually provide a number of different options of accessing their systems. So it's no longer really possible to differentiate storage systems purely on the way that they're accessed, but you need to understand the entire topology, because, for example, you might have a file system which is used as a volume within Kubernetes, but that is actually backed by, for example, an object store. So it has the shared capability of the shared attributes of a file system on a front end, but it might have the latency characteristics and the scaling characteristics of an object store on the back end, for example. In future, what we're working on is a white paper to cover the performance and benchmarking of volumes and databases, and the idea is to provide some backdrop and tools and best practices for doing this in cloud-native environments. And specifically, we're doing this so that end users can understand how to do this for themselves, because it's more important than ever to test these sort of systems in your own environments, as it's very hard to compare published results between different vendors or different projects. As always, we'd love to get you involved. The SIG meets publicly on the 2nd and 4th Wednesday of every month. All the details are in the GitHub repo. The minutes are public, as are the mailing lists and the recordings. And we'd love to hear from you on our next call. What we need help with in terms of going forward is information with the documents that we're working on, such as the performance and white papers. And of course, we're looking for tech leads to help with project reviews and analysis of the landscape. So as always, we'd love to hear from you. Please continue to help us with our community. And we thank you for joining our presentation.
Thank you.
好，非常感谢二位的精彩演讲。Thank you, Erin. Thank you, Alex, for such a wonderful speech. 好，在我们进入问答环节之前呢，我们想请我们的大家看一下，我们其他房间有二维码，大家扫二维码可以进入其他房间。稍等，我给大家播放一下。
Hi everyone. Erin and I are online and happy to answer any questions.
Okay, Alex. Before you start the answer questions, I want to remind our attendees that is QR code for other rooms. 观众朋友们看一下这个，我们现在是大会是4场直播间同时开放的，已经注册的朋友呢，可以扫这二维码，可以进入其他直播房间去进行看直播。好，现在我们进入问答环节，有请 Alex Erin 在线回答大家的问题。考虑到我们的这个讲师的方便呢，大家尽可能用英文提问。And Alex and Erin, you have 15 minutes for Q&A. You can answer questions in this Q&A columns. Also, you can share other points you want to share.
Thank you. There's currently one question in the Q&A, and that is why does storage still look so hard? That is a very good question. I think in the infrastructure world, we see that compute technologies iterate very quickly, and networking technologies iterate quickly, but a bit slower than compute. But storage technologies tend to iterate a little slower, and I think that's because there is such a high requirement for stability and reliability in a variety of different scenarios, and certainly when we look at cloud native environments, we're adding additional requirements like dynamic provisioning and self-service and automation that needs to be considered. So taking all of those things into consideration, there are a number of challenges, and I think the other aspect is that there are now a variety of storage systems, both sort of open source and commercial, which provide different solutions for different use cases, and some are ideal for providing perhaps access to volumes for transactional applications, while others might be ideal for providing volumes for analytics. And we mustn't forget, of course, that storage systems are very broad and include things like object stores and databases and key value stores too. The other aspect that I think we should look at is there is a positive aspect here, right? So over the last 2 or 3 years, a number of different storage providers and a number of different projects have emerged that now make it quite easy to deploy stateful applications in Kubernetes. There are a number of projects which allow you to have a fully software-defined storage environment, and there are the CSI project which allows Kubernetes to interact with just about every storage provider. So what we see now is that storage is getting easier, and we also see that storage is getting to the point where we can now take all the benefits of Kubernetes and the orchestration and the automation and the self-service and apply that to the storage environments as well. Erin, I don't know if there was anything you wanted to add.
No, I think that we as a group tried to assimilate a set of use cases that we thought were useful, but it proved a little more difficult than we had intended. And we're looking for feedback of how we can more easily help users. So we'd love for you to join the SIG and weigh in on what would be helpful to make it less hard, whether it's documentation or showing anti-patterns as mentioned in the presentation. We do have a white paper that describes a lot of the technology, and we hope that helps users more. But if you have feedback on what you'd like to see, we'd like to hear that as well.
Indeed, it's just echoing that point. We're we're always keen to have new members join the SIG. The SIG is a public community with subject matter experts from a variety of different fields. And we meet a couple of times a month, but we also work together on various initiatives and projects, as well as doing some of the key CNCF work around project evaluations and project reviews. I think, given that we have a couple of minutes, Erin, do you want to maybe just talk a little bit about some of the process that we've been building for project reviews?
Sure. So, I mean, in general, the processes have changed somewhat, especially the sandbox project. I think it's important to note that where this used to be a much more intensive process, that's been since updated as part of the CNCF to be a little more streamlined, in that we don't require anymore that projects wanting to join as sandbox are required to come to the SIG and present. Though that's encouraged, it's good to try to grow the community even at a sandbox level, and have that one-on-one communication with the community. And as you go through the process, is also mentioned that we put in our presentation, that gives us a chance to give projects feedback on different areas that they need to grow and cultivate to get to the next level. Because it's important that we're looking at the landscape, how projects will be adopted, if they have healthy metrics or there's things they need to improve. By directly engaging with the SIG, we're able to provide a good recommendation to the TOC in order for them to vote on it. So part of that process has changed if you have been engaged in the past. Otherwise, we do our best to do a very thorough due diligence along with the TOC member who's looking to sponsor it. And that's a good interactive process, looking through, documentation, user stories, understanding how broad the community is. All those things are considered when we're looking at different projects.
Brilliant. I think one last point that I'd like to make is some of the sort of work that's ongoing. We always have a variety of different projects that are in different stages of review, and in our meetings we often have different projects present. So joining our calls is a good way to find out what's happening in the community and what's happening in the different projects. And I also wanted to just highlight that we're working on a paper to help explain some of the complexities and some of the considerations for performance and benchmarking, and maybe provide some basic tools, basic guidelines on how to test performance and how to benchmark your own cloud native storage environments, whether that's running in a cloud and consuming a service, or if it's running using a software or a hardware storage provider. We don't seem to have any other questions, so I think I'll just double check with Erin to see if there's any other items we wanted to mention. Otherwise, I think thank you for joining us, and thank you for listening to the information on the CNCF SIG storage.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Erin. I hope we can make more questions to take your time. OK， 我们的这两位讲师现在是在国外，所以有时差，是非常辛苦的啊。大家如果没有问题的话，我们就让老师先去休息了。Alex, what's the time in your place? Midnight or morning?
For me, I'm in London, so it's 9 o'clock in the morning.
Okay, still
but
fine.
I think Erin is very early in the morning.
Yeah, 2:13 in the morning.
Wow. So should let you go, and so Alex can go to your job, and Erin you can have more sleep.
Yes.
It's such early morning. Okay, thank you very much. Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.